Welcome back to the Mountain Morning Show, and I could not be more happy than to have Dr. Carol Wilson here. She's Colby. This is probably a good title too. Colby Larson's mom. Is that okay?
Yes, call me Colby.
But also with titles besides doctor, PhD, professor as well, and author. Wow. And frequent traveler to Nepal.
Yes, yes, yes.
Thrilled to have you here.
I Love Nepal t-shirt.
I love this.
And I have something for you off the bat here. This is a kata
that's so awesome.
that I actually bought in Tibet, and it was blessed by Shangpa Rinpoche.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What a nice gift. That is terrific. I understand the importance of these. They're just awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. You have been to Nepal a lot.
Yes, I have.
And typically you go about, every other year, according to Colby. And this is how we got into this conversation one day. I said, I've always wanted to travel there. And he says, my mom goes every year, every other year. I'm like, really?
Yeah. No.
And this year was a little different for you. You just happened, for whatever reason, and you must have felt some desire to go back. You went back, what, a couple months after returning from the most recent trip?
Yeah, well, you know, the thing is, usually I go for a couple of months, but I went over in September. I was there for 4 months. I went to Tibet during that time. I came back in January, and then I turned around and went back and landed 5 minutes before the earthquake.
Oh my goodness.
So I have a very deep karmic connection to Nepal.
Indeed,
it's really,
you do.
It's obvious. It's very obvious.
Well, it is, because I know that you have a lot of friends there and some people who really needed you to be there, really. That's the truth of it. There were people that needed you to be there, and you were there. What an experience this must have been. So talk to me first about the earthquake a little bit and what happened. You know, you were at the airport when
Yes,
this
I was. We had just landed, and I was standing in the visa line. And when the earthquake hit, we were thrown. I mean, literally thrown. I was thrown probably, 6-7 feet. And most people started running outside, but I got out my iPhone and I started videotaping. So I was actually...
I never have the presence of mind to do that, and I'm a photographer. But you do.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's really weird because I was thinking, gosh, everyone's gone from the visa line. I'm first in line now. I can get my visa, which I did.
Yeah.
And so I did some more videotaping, but yeah, it's funny because even through, like 300 aftershocks and additional earthquakes, I never had any fear. And when Nepalis would say something to me about it, the only thing I came up with was landslides and the earthquakes are not in my DNA. It's in your DNA, which is, why they're just terrified.
Sure. They've had them, but nothing like this before. This was unprecedented even to them.
Yeah, not since the 1934 earthquake. I mean, there were about 17,000 people who died in a minute. It was that bad of an earthquake. But
and we're less than half that. So obviously great, but still 6,000 plus people have perished.
Yeah.
This is a devastating time there.
If it would have been on a Saturday or during the week rather than a Saturday, the death toll would have been more than double, maybe triple, because children would have been in school, people would have been in buildings, and that's why the death toll is as low as it is because the earthquake was at noon on a Saturday.
Wow, what a lucky thing. Yeah, can you imagine? You told me there was one school alone that collapsed. Five floors, you said?
Yes, it just collapsed, and I have a picture of it. 2,000 children would have been in that school, and they would have been killed. That's how bad it was, yes.
It's hard to believe how devastating this was, but when you look, and much of the brick construction, the masonry construction, not in any way capable of handling earthquakes, which is surprising. I suppose I'm a little shocked, if you're building in a mountainous place like this, that's kind of known for that. I'm surprised they didn't have more regulation, but they don't. There's nothing they pretty much put up anything they want, which I guess brings us to the point of now, what do they do to live now? Where are people living?
Well, this earthquake affected those in the villages the most. If someone has a house constructed of mud, of course it was completely destroyed. And so I did distribute with my team over 400 tarps to provide temporary shelter for people in the villages, the real underserved areas. And we delivered a lot of needed food. But you know, there's been phases. Now, the phase
Sure.
they're in now is they have to have shelter that's a little more permanent than a tarp, that
Yeah,
can
for sure.
withstand the wind, and the monsoon season is starting, the heavy rains
Yeah.
and so forth. So,
Yeah, you can't live in those kind of conditions for long.
right.
Talk to me about, you know, you have friends there. You have people that you've known for years. Talk to me about what the kind of conversations you were having with them were. Can you tell us about their feelings and what they've gone through? I think it's one thing to obviously know what an earthquake, you know, what it looks like. We've seen the devastation, but to understand what these people are feeling is a different thing.
You know, they're terrified. I've seen what happens when there's a tremor. A lot of them have wanted to get out of the city and go to the villages where they grew up in. It's safer. Really, Kathmandu is a dangerous place to be because there are so many buildings that are literally on the verge of collapsing.
Right.
I mean, I
If
would
they
walk.
didn't fall down, they
Oh,
are
absolutely.
about
They're
to.
just waiting. Even walking to my hotel, there's buildings with, you know, stilts trying to hold them up, and they're starting to demolish them. But the demolition is so lengthy. Just at the corner of the hotel I was staying with, they've been trying to demolish a couple of houses for, you know, the entire month I was there. They were working on just the demolition of 2 houses. So,
Wow.
and the Nepalese army has been there. That one picture you showed with the car underneath it,
Right.
I've seen 20 army guys there working on that site. So, you know, the cleanup before the rebuilding in itself is a lot of
enormous.
job.
Yeah.
Oh yes, it's a big job.
With regard to some of the villages, you mentioned one, and it was amazing. There are some villages that were untouched, even though, you know, further away even, when the epicenter buildings came down. Talk to me about that.
Well, there's one area, Pokhara, that's a very popular adventure touristy city.
Right.
It was untouched by the earthquake, and it's really difficult to understand. It's a real quandary to scientists because Pokhara is the same distance from the epicenter as Kathmandu, and the waves should have gone in both directions, but they didn't. And actually, I had to see it to believe it. I went to Pokhara
I
for
bet.
4 days, and I just did not believe it until I saw it, because I was used to going to places where you're on this little dirt road, and on either side of the road there's just collapsed houses and collapsed buildings all along the way. Total destruction.
It's amazing. Talk to me about also what it's like to return to a place where you're used to. I mean, you typically stay at the monastery, right? And now when you went back, that's not safe. So
Yes,
talk to me about that.
Well, a lot of times when I go over, I'm in meditation retreat in Kittapur, the Kagyu Institute for Buddhist
One of the best
Studies.
reasons to go.
Yes, and so when I went over in September, I spent a lot of time in retreat, and I'd planned on spending some time there also and doing some translation work that I've been doing. But my room was damaged, and it was unsafe for me to be at the monastery. So the nuns would come to Tamil to visit me when I needed to see them, and they really didn't want me there. They said it just was not safe to be there. They showed me pictures and so forth. So I stayed at a hotel in Tamil. And
it's a little different experience, isn't it? I imagine from what you're used to. You're used to having a much more really, you know, ingrained in the culture, and suddenly it's more of a tourist thing. It's a little different when you're staying in a hotel. That's not something you're used to. You're used to being very much part of what's going on.
You know, the thing is in Tamil, because it's a touristy place, people speak English.
Yeah.
But when you get out into the villages, people don't speak English. In fact, I was working with Janet M. Bash from Lightning Tree Films. She's done some movies of my experience, and she wanted me to interview people and do these little clips But when I would get out into the villages, I couldn't find anyone who spoke English well enough to interview them. So it is kind of a different experience. And I never knew what was going on as far as dialogue unless I asked a Nepali to translate. So I would say, now, I need to know what's going on here, so please, translate
bring me
for
in.
me.
Talk to me about the difference between this for a minute. Let's go aside from the earthquake, because it's such a, wow, what a, it's almost hard to talk about, I think.
It is.
It's so sad. Talk to me about the difference between it and spending some time over in Tibet. There's so many people who want to see the Dalai Lama and his people return to Tibet. Clearly the Chinese are never going to let this happen, it seems. But what was the experience like in Tibet to be there?
Tibet is still, when people say to me Tibet's history, forget about Tibet. Tibet is as magical, I think, as it ever was.
The place is wonderful.
Really, the Chinese, they can take over, they can build their buildings, and I've never seen anything like what they've done there as quickly as they've done it in the past few years. But, they'll never destroy the energy of Tibet. Even when we go to the monasteries that they destroyed, now they're being rebuilt, and a lot of people will say, they're just trying to turn this now into a Disneyland, to bring some tourists in to see. But still, Tibet is so vast. You get out into the country and among the people, and you still see some of the mani walls and the people working in the fields and the yak. I love yak. I have so many videos of yaks and listening to their bells, and there's so much of Tibet that the Chinese can never change.
Wow.
So that's kind of my take on it. Some people think Tibet's gone forever, but I don't feel that way.
Well, and thankfully, it seems that Nepal is not gone forever, but it sure, as bad as the devastation is, it certainly could have been worse. But tell us what we can do to help out.
Well, I've been fundraising. Initially, people were PayPaling donations to me because I have an on-the-ground team, and then I decided to develop a GoFundMe account. So I've been receiving some donations, and the team that I work with, Nepalis, they were raised in the villages and they really understand the territory.
Right.
These big organizations, I keep telling people, I never saw the American Red Cross on the ground. I saw China Red Cross in a couple of places, but not, but this team, they know where the help was needed. In fact, the last village we went to, I couldn't understand the sense of urgency until I was looking at a chart. The second earthquake, the 7.3, it impacted this particular village where there were thousands of injuries and deaths, 300 deaths. And we were there. We were delivering tarps and food, a huge truck. And my Jeep driver, he bailed out on us. The truck driver bailed out. And we had to unload everything. And among the villages, we found someone who had a tractor with a trailer. We loaded it all up. And 1 o'clock in the morning, we're on a tractor for 3 hours, getting it into a village that technically was a helicopter dropped area, but we got there. Yeah,
you
really.
guys are going in a tractor.
Yeah, and but in retrospect, at the time, I didn't realize why we were going. It's like sometimes people would talk, and my motto became, I don't talk, I just go. That's kind of how we were operating. We just would go where we were needed, and I would always find out, you want to know what? And it's why I trust my team so much, because they really knew.
Yeah.
And how can people know that kind of thing?
Being there is what it really requires.
Yes.
How can people what's your GoFundMe site? Where do people go?
It's GoFundMe.org, and then it's UBFCSG, I believe, is the site I gave it to.
All right, I believe we have it up on screen right now.
Yeah.
So you can go there and help out with Susan and her efforts there. I have to ask you before we go, we have just another moment, new book coming? for us?
You know, I started
Your last
writing.
one was on
my first book is Healing Power Beyond
Yep.
Medicine, that was published in 2011. I've been working on my second book, but I really feel the need to really address human values.
The differences between what we
And-
have
and-
here and
yes, and you
yeah.
know, for a Western audience, because it really is different.
Yeah,
You know.
I'll say, because yeah, you look at the way people value family and things so much. Well, to be honest, I mean, in a much higher order than we do here in the States.
Well, when you
too.
eliminate the materialism, what do you have left? You have the human values. And you know, the Nepalese, their tenacity. You know, I met a medical doctor from San Francisco who went to Nepal for 10 days, and he was talking to me about, he says, I can't believe these people,
Yeah.
that they can lose everything and they have
They still
smiles
care.
on their face,
It is
that
amazing.
big Nepali smile. So we were
Well-
talking about what would happen to Americans if something like this happened.
It would certainly be different. And you have a great smile and the I Love Nepal shirt, which is
thank
very clear
you.
how much you care for that place.
Oh,
Thank you
yes.
so much for coming and sharing your experience
Oh,
with us.
thank you, Joe.
So
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Thank you. Susan Wilson. We will be back with more on the Mountain Morning Show, wrapping up this hour right after these messages.